If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you that my marriage to Elena was unbreakable. We were that couple, the kind who shared inside jokes, finished each other's sentences, and turned heads at parties with our easy chemistry. For over a decade, we built a life that felt solid, a shared dream immune to outside chaos. Or so I thought. Elena was the director of operations at a prestigious architecture firm in Charleston, South Carolina. Her role demanded long hours, strategic planning, and a knack for navigating high-stakes situations. I admired her brilliance, her poise under pressure. Meanwhile, my career as a systems analyst kept me busy with deadlines and data. We were a team, or at least we used to be. The shift began subtly, the way a crack in glass might spread unseen until it threatens the whole structure. Elena started coming home later, claiming urgent deadlines or last-minute client meetings. She became glued to her phone, her thumb flicking across the screen in a way that seemed automatic, almost practiced. The laughter that once filled our home now came less frequently, replaced by long silences and vague explanations. I told myself it was stress. Her firm had landed a massive contract with a Fortune 500 company, and she often mentioned the pressure to deliver. Still, something in her tone felt off, like there was more she wasn't saying. One night, Elena came home hours later than usual, her face flushed, her words hurried. She brushed off my questions with a fleeting explanation about a client dinner that ran late. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But I noticed how she barely touched her dinner that night, her mind clearly elsewhere. Later, as she showered, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at it without thinking. The preview on the screen read, "You were stunning tonight. Can't stop thinking about it." The sender was listed only as M. My stomach tightened as I stared at the screen. Who was M? Stunning? What had happened tonight that lingered in someone's mind? I tried to push the questions away, but they refused to leave. Over the next few days, the doubts grew louder. Elena's phone rarely left her hand. When I asked about her day, her responses were filled with jargon-heavy detours that offered little clarity. She started dressing more carefully. Sleek blouses, bold lipstick, and heels that clicked sharply against our hardwood floors. I told myself it was part of her professional image, but the change felt sudden, deliberate. The tipping point came one Friday evening when Elena mentioned a work dinner to celebrate her firm's latest milestone. I offered to drive her, but she insisted it was informal and she'd take her own car. Something about her tone made my chest tighten, but I didn't press. An hour later, unease gnawed at me until I couldn't sit still. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I parked a block away from the upscale downtown restaurant she had mentioned. From the car, I watched as Elena arrived, laughing and chatting with a group of colleagues. My breath hitched when I noticed a man among them, a tall, self-assured figure who seemed to hold her attention. His name, I would later learn, was Marcus. Elena had mentioned him before, describing him as the firm's newest hire brought in to streamline processes for the high-profile client. She spoke of his expertise and sharp instincts, but now, seeing them together, those glowing comments took on a different meaning. The next morning, while Elena was out running errands, I did something I had never done in our marriage. I opened her laptop. It was a violation of trust, and I hated myself for it, but I needed answers. Buried in a folder labeled Client Briefs was a trail of damning evidence. Screenshots of text conversations between Elena and Marcus revealed the truth I had been avoiding. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Just hearing from you makes my day better. I'll make excuses if anyone asks. You deserve a break." The words pierced me like shards of glass. This wasn't harmless flirtation. It was an affair, and it had been going on for months. As I pieced together the timeline, the patterns became clear. Every late night, every work dinner, every excuse, it all aligned with Marcus's presence. I found photos, too, shots of them at conferences, candid moments at retreats. One picture, taken in the lounge of a sleek hotel, showed Elena leaning into Marcus, her smile radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed more than screenshots. I needed to understand the full extent of the betrayal. So, I waited, pretending everything was fine while I gathered information. A week later, As Elena showered, her phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate. The message was from Marcus. Room 914. Can't wait to see you. The words hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just cheating. She was with him now in a hotel room while I sat at home. My hands shook as I set the phone down, my mind racing. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak. They all swirled together, threatening to pull me under. But amidst the chaos of my emotions, a thought emerged with startling clarity. If Elena wanted to live a double life, I would make sure she couldn't escape its consequences. The morning after discovering Marcus's message, I sat at the breakfast table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Elena moved through the house with practiced ease, humming softly as she prepared for work. She greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, her demeanor as effortless as always. If guilt weighed on her, she carried it well. The weight of what I had uncovered pressed heavily on my chest. Elena wasn't just lying. She was building a life that excluded me, a hidden existence behind the walls of our marriage. Despite the raw ache of betrayal, I hesitated to confront her. I needed to be certain of the depth of her deception before I acted. That evening, she mentioned a late meeting. Her tone was light, her explanation seamless, but I caught the faintest quiver in her voice. She kissed me goodbye, her perfume lingering in the air like a mocking reminder of the life we'd built together. This time, I didn't stay home. I followed her. Her car weaved through downtown Charleston, finally pulling into the lot of an elegant boutique hotel. My heart pounded as I watched her step out, phone in hand, her pace calm and deliberate. I parked a few spaces away, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. Minutes turned into an hour. When Marcus emerged from the elevator, my chest tightened. His suit was sharp, his confidence palpable. Elena followed shortly after, her laughter carrying faintly through the glass doors. Their conversation was animated, their proximity too close to be professional. I sat frozen, torn between storming inside and gathering more evidence. My hands shook as I snapped photos, my phone capturing moments that confirmed everything I feared. When they finally disappeared into the elevator together, I couldn't stay. I drove home in silence, my thoughts racing with images of what might be happening behind those closed doors. Over the next few days, I turned my focus to finding proof that couldn't be denied. Liam, my closest friend and confidant, had been my sounding board through this ordeal. His advice was clear: don't confront her until you have everything. Make it impossible for her to twist the story. With trembling hands, I accessed Elena's laptop again, determined to uncover more. In a folder labeled Work Notes, I found her digital trail. Draft emails she'd never sent laid bare the extent of her betrayal. Can't wait to see you tonight. Just thinking about you makes my day brighter. I hate lying to him, but I can't imagine life without you. The messages weren't just flirtatious, they were raw and emotional. Elena wasn't merely having an affair. She had built an emotional connection with Marcus that overshadowed anything we shared. I saved everything: the emails, the photos, the timeline of their rendezvous. Each piece felt like another crack in the foundation of our life together. The next Friday, Elena told me about a weekend retreat her firm had organized, a bonding event meant to foster team collaboration. Her voice was steady, her smile convincing, but I saw the tension in her eyes. This time, I didn't follow her right away. Instead, I waited until she was checked into the hotel. Liam had helped me rent a room a floor above hers, and I arrived late that evening with a discreet camera in hand. I didn't have to wait long. Elena and Marcus emerged from their room, their movements relaxed, their conversation intimate. They walked through the lobby together, their hands brushing as they laughed. I captured it all: the smiles, the lingering glances, the unmistakable chemistry. When Elena returned home on Sunday evening, she greeted me with a practiced ease, recounting tales of team-building exercises and professional breakthroughs. I said nothing, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. That night, I placed the photos and emails on the kitchen table, waiting for her to see them. When she did, her expression froze. For a moment, she said nothing, her mask slipping to reveal guilt and panic. As she reached for the evidence, I stopped her with a single glance. The words I'd rehearsed for days poured out, my voice shaking with fury and heartbreak. I told her about the nights I had followed her, the messages I'd found, the lies she'd told. There was no room for denial, no opportunity to deflect. The truth was staring her in the face. Elena's confession came in halting bursts, her voice cracking with emotion. She spoke of feeling invisible, of a connection with Marcus that filled a void she hadn't known existed. She begged for forgiveness, her tears soaking the pages of evidence I had laid before her. But her words felt hollow, her remorse too little, too late. In the days that followed, I packed my belongings and moved into Liam's spare room. Elena's texts and calls became a constant drumbeat of apologies and pleas, alternating between desperation and promises to change. I read them without responding, the trust that had defined our relationship now irreparably broken. Liam's steady presence became my lifeline. He reminded me that healing would take time, that the pain I carried wouldn't define me forever. I clung to his words, even as I struggled with the echoes of Elena's betrayal. The memories of her laughter, her smile, the life we had shared. They haunted me like shadows that refused to fade. The days after leaving Elena and the home we had built together felt surreal, like stepping into a distorted version of my life. The familiarity of my routines was gone, replaced by the stark reality of betrayal. Her pleas for forgiveness echoed in my mind, but I couldn't erase the images of her and Marcus. The stolen moments, the lies, the life she had constructed without me. I stayed with Liam, his spare room becoming both a sanctuary and a reminder of how far I had fallen. He listened without judgment as I vented my confusion, anger, and heartbreak. But even his steady reassurance couldn't dull the sharp edges of my pain. Elena's attempts to reach me were relentless. Each day brought new messages, voicemails, and emails, her words alternating between sorrow and desperation. She begged to meet, to explain, to somehow repair what she had destroyed. At first, I ignored her, the thought of seeing her unbearable. But as the days stretched into weeks, I began to wonder if hearing her out might provide the closure I needed. We met at a quiet coffee shop on a rainy afternoon, the subdued hum of conversations providing a buffer against the tension. Elena arrived early, her face pale and drawn, her eyes shadowed with regret. Her words spilled out in a torrent of guilt and remorse, each one carrying a weight she seemed desperate to shed. She admitted the affair had been a mistake, a reckless escape from feelings of emptiness and dissatisfaction she hadn't known how to confront. She insisted it had never been about replacing me but about filling a void she didn't understand. Her tears seemed genuine, her words raw, but they couldn't penetrate the wall of pain that now stood between us. In the weeks that followed, I became consumed by a need to know the full scope of Elena's betrayal. It wasn't enough to know what had happened. I needed to understand every detail, every lie, every stolen moment, every deception. Liam, ever resourceful, helped me unravel the tangled web of their affair. Together, we combed through financial records, work schedules, and the digital breadcrumbs Elena had left behind. Each discovery added another piece to the puzzle, painting a picture of a relationship that had been calculated and deliberate. What hurt most wasn't the physical aspect of their affair, but the emotional intimacy they had shared. Their messages revealed dreams, plans, and secrets. A life they had created where I didn't exist. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. As I delved deeper, Marcus's true nature came into focus. He wasn't just a charming opportunist. He was a manipulator who thrived on control. His messages to Elena, laced with subtle dominance, showed how he had kept her tethered to him. The most damning discovery came late one night. Hidden in a folder on Elena's laptop were documents detailing her company's financial strategies. Information that Marcus had clearly coerced her into sharing. It wasn't just an affair. It was corporate espionage, and Elena had been unwittingly complicit. Armed with this new understanding, I decided to confront Marcus directly. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but the need to face him outweighed the fear of what might happen. I found him at a networking event Elena had mentioned in passing, a polished gathering of industry professionals where his presence would blend seamlessly. He was easy to spot, his charisma and confidence drawing people to him like moths to a flame. When I approached, His expression shifted from polite curiosity to guarded recognition. I didn't raise my voice or cause a scene. Instead, I calmly outlined everything I knew about his affair with Elena and the documents he had coerced her into sharing. As I spoke, his mask began to crack. He denied nothing, offering a smug, dismissive remark about how relationships are complicated, and that Elena clearly needed something you couldn't provide. His arrogance stung, but it also exposed his fatal flaw, his belief in his own untouchability. With Elena's reluctant cooperation, Liam and I spent weeks building a case against Marcus. We gathered evidence of his misuse of company resources, his manipulation of Elena, and his involvement in shady dealings. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about holding him accountable for the harm he had caused. The fallout was swift. Marcus's employer launched an internal investigation, uncovering enough impropriety to force his resignation. His reputation, once sterling, was irreparably tarnished. Elena, too, faced consequences. While her willingness to come forward earned her some leniency, the damage to her career was significant. As the dust began to settle, I found myself at a crossroads. The marriage Elena and I had built was gone, shattered under the weight of her betrayal. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to hate her entirely. There was still a part of me that cared for her, that wanted to believe redemption was possible. We continued counseling, not in the hope of saving our marriage, but to find closure. Through those sessions, I began to see Elena not as the villain of my story, but as a flawed and hurting person who had made terrible choices. It didn't excuse her actions, but it allowed me to let go of the anger that had consumed me. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not for us, but for myself. I began to rebuild, leaning on Liam's support and rediscovering the parts of me that had been lost in the chaos. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to take. And as I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons I had learned. About love, about betrayal, and about the resilience it takes to rebuild from the ashes. After Marcus's downfall, I naively thought the worst was behind me. Exposing his manipulations had brought a sense of victory, but the aftermath was anything but simple. The chaos of betrayal lingered, its shadow stretching over every attempt I made to move forward. Elena's life unraveled in the wake of the investigation. Though her cooperation spared her from the most severe repercussions, the damage to her career was irreversible. She lost her position at the architecture firm and moved back in with her parents, a decision she called an opportunity for self-reflection. To me, it felt more like a retreat from the wreckage we had left behind. Her messages continued, a relentless stream of apologies, regrets, and pleas for reconciliation. She spoke of the affair as a wake-up call, a mistake that had forced her to confront her own unhappiness. She wanted us to start over, to rebuild from the ruins. But trust, once shattered, didn't mend easily. We met a few times to talk, her eyes heavy with regret. She admitted to being swept up by Marcus's charm, the thrill of something new masking the emptiness she hadn't known how to address. I listened, but forgiveness felt distant, like an abstract concept I couldn't grasp. Our conversations ended with understanding, but not resolution. In the weeks that followed, I turned my focus to rebuilding my own life. Liam encouraged me to reclaim the hobbies and passions I had neglected, urging me to find joy in the things that made me feel alive. It was during one of these moments that I met Claire. Claire was a quiet force of nature, a colleague of Liam's whose intelligence was matched by her genuine warmth. She had heard fragments of my story through Liam and offered support in an unobtrusive way. Our initial interactions were casual discussions about books, the absurdities of office culture, and the best coffee spots in Charleston. But over time, her presence became a source of solace. Where Elena had been fiery and driven, Claire was steady and empathetic. She listened without judgment, offering perspectives that felt more like guidance than advice. She didn't pry into my past, though I sensed she understood more than she let on. Her kindness was a balm for wounds that had yet to heal. One evening, Claire hesitated during one of our conversations, her usual calm replaced by a hint of unease. She told me there was something she needed to share, something that had weighed on her for weeks. Claire revealed that she had worked with Marcus years earlier at a firm in Atlanta. She described him as charismatic and ambitious but also deeply manipulative. During their time working together, she had seen him charm and exploit others, particularly women, for his own gain. Her words painted a picture of a man who thrived on control, using charm as a weapon to mask his true nature. Then she dropped a bombshell. Marcus had a pattern of targeting women in vulnerable positions, manipulating them to gain access to their resources, influence, and connections. Rebecca, she believed, had been one of many. The revelation left me reeling. What I had thought was a misguided affair born of mutual attraction was something far darker. Marcus's relationship with Elena wasn't about love or even lust. It was calculated, another entry in a long line of conquests designed to feed his ambitions. Fueled by Claire's revelation, Liam and I began digging into Marcus's past. With Claire's help, we uncovered a trail of deceit that stretched far beyond Elena. At least 3 other women had fallen victim to his manipulations, each left with shattered careers or reputations. One woman, Laura, hesitantly agreed to speak with me after weeks of persistence. Her voice was cautious as she recounted her experience, but as I shared my own, she began to open up. Laura described a man who had entered her life with promises of support and partnership, only to exploit her resources and vanish when things became inconvenient. Hearing her story filled me with a mix of validation and anger. It confirmed what I had come to suspect. Marcus wasn't just a cheater, he was a predator. My anger at Elena began to shift, redirected toward the man who had orchestrated so much pain. I met with Elena one final time, determined to share what I had learned. We sat on a park bench under a canopy of autumn leaves, the crisp air sharp against the tension between us. As I explained Marcus's pattern of manipulation and deceit, her expression shifted from shock to quiet despair. She admitted that she had started to see the cracks in Marcus's charm toward the end of their relationship, but hearing the full scope of his actions forced her to confront the depth of her mistake. It was a bittersweet moment. Elena's regret was palpable, her pain undeniable, but her acknowledgement brought a measure of closure I hadn't expected. With Elena's cooperation, we worked to connect the dots between Marcus's victims. Using Claire's professional network and Liam's investigative skills, we compiled a damning dossier of evidence. The weight of the information ensured that Marcus's reputation, already damaged, was obliterated. The fallout was swift. Marcus's name became synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Legal action followed, though many of his victims chose to remain anonymous. For the first time, Marcus faced consequences for his actions. As the chaos settled, I found myself at a crossroads. My relationship with Elena had ended, but it wasn't defined by bitterness. Our final conversations were marked by mutual acknowledgement of our faults and an understanding that moving forward meant letting go. Claire became a constant presence in my life, her steady support helping me navigate the uncertainty of starting over. Over time, our friendship deepened into something more, a quiet, steady connection that felt like healing. Looking back, I'm struck by the resilience of the human spirit. Betrayal, heartbreak, and pain are inevitable parts of life, but so are growth, forgiveness, and the chance to rebuild. The journey was messy, but it led to a peace I never thought I'd find. Months after Marcus's downfall, life had finally settled into a fragile but welcome rhythm. The chaos that had once consumed my every thought now felt like a distant memory, though its echoes lingered in unexpected moments. The journey to this point had been grueling, marked by heartbreak, anger, and hard-earned clarity. But as I sat on the balcony of my modest apartment, gazing at the twinkling city lights, I felt a quiet sense of peace. The storm had passed, and I had survived. Elena had moved to a new city, far from the life we had shared. She'd taken a job with a nonprofit, focusing on housing initiatives for underserved communities. It was a far cry from the corporate career she had once pursued so fiercely. Though we spoke occasionally, our conversations were polite and surface level, lacking the depth we once shared. There was no lingering bitterness, only the quiet acknowledgement of a chapter that had ended. Claire and I, on the other hand, had grown inseparable. Our connection had deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. Where Elena had been unpredictable and tumultuous, Claire was a steady presence, a harbor in the storm. She brought warmth and stability back into my life, showing me that joy could still be found, even after the deepest betrayals. One morning, as I sifted through the mail, I came across an unmarked envelope. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the absence of a return address piqued my curiosity. Tearing it open, I found a handwritten note accompanied by a stack of photographs. The letter was from Laura, one of Marcus's former victims. She thanked me for reaching out and for helping to expose the truth about him. Her gratitude was palpable, her words filled with hope for a future unburdened by his manipulations. But it was the photographs that captured my attention. The images showed Marcus with another woman, someone I didn't recognize, engaged in unmistakably intimate moments. The timestamps revealed they had been taken months before Marcus had entered Elena's life. My chest tightened as I realized the full extent of his duplicity. He had been juggling multiple relationships, each one a calculated move in his web of control. The emotions the photos stirred were complex. Anger for the women he had deceived, vindication for the justice we had sought, and a strange, final release from the hold he once had over my life. Determined to ensure the photos served a purpose, I shared them with Claire and Liam. We decided to reach out to the other women Marcus had hurt, creating a network of support for those who had suffered in silence. The images weren't meant to reopen old wounds, but to validate their experiences and remind them that they weren't alone. The response was overwhelming. Stories of shared pain and resilience poured in, forming a tapestry of solidarity. Women who had once felt isolated by their shame began to find strength in each other. Seeing this network flourish was a reminder of the power of community and the resilience of those who had endured so much. Just when I thought Marcus was firmly in the past, fate intervened. One rainy afternoon, I spotted him at a coffee shop, his presence as jarring as a ghost from another life. He looked different. His once polished appearance now disheveled, his confidence replaced by something closer to desperation. He noticed me almost immediately, his expression flickering between recognition and unease. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air. Finally, he approached, offering a weak apology for the harm he had caused. His words were hollow, a half-hearted attempt to absolve himself of guilt. I listened without reaction, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of my anger. As he left, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. Marcus no longer held any power over me, or the others he had hurt. His downfall had been his own doing, and I no longer needed his acknowledgement to move forward. Life continued, each day bringing small victories that felt monumental in their simplicity. Claire and I grew closer, our relationship rooted in trust and mutual respect. She understood the scars I carried, never trying to diminish their significance but helping me see them as proof of my resilience. One evening, as we sat on the couch sharing a quiet moment, Claire asked me what I had learned from the ordeal. The question gave me pause, forcing me to reflect on the long and winding road that had brought me to this point. I told her I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, of recognizing when to let go and when to hold on. I had learned that love couldn't thrive without trust and that forgiveness, while powerful, wasn't always synonymous with reconciliation. Most importantly, I had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding a way to live with it. Months later, I received an email from Elena. She had heard about the support network we had helped create and wanted to contribute in some way. Her message was brief but heartfelt, expressing gratitude for the role I had played in her journey towards self-awareness and growth. Her email marked the final piece of closure I hadn't realized I needed. It was a reminder that even in the aftermath of betrayal, there was room for understanding and forgiveness. Elena and I would never return to what we once were, but we had both found our paths forward, and that was enough. As I closed her email, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The scars of the past would always remain, but they no longer defined me. I had found love again, forged new connections, and discovered a strength within myself that I hadn't known existed. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly free.